Great, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Richard Haas. I'm with Policy Tracker. We do research, training, and news on spectrum policy. That's our sort of niche. Not good at the self-promo, but we have a podcast as well that's free to listen to if you're interested in that. Yeah, 6G, I think it's remarkable in a way because 6G could be 4 years away, and that's not a very long time. So I think it's really important to start talking about this topic, and I think we've got an excellent lineup here of speakers who will be giving some introductory remarks first. And we'll start off with Alexander Kuhn. He's head of section International and National Spectrum Management at the German regulator, the BNetzA. Feel free to, you can go up or you can do it here. It's up to you. And there's a clicker right there.
There's the clicker, there are my slides. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back again at the 5G conference and speak a little bit ahead on the lessons learned and maybe an outlook to 6G as well. We heard already that 5G is a very comprehensive system which provided a lot of new things as well and made a lot of regulatory challenges possible as well for the regulators in order to make available either the spectrum, make it also adaptable to adaptive antenna systems and so on. So we are very keen to see what 6G will bring to us. And I put together some slides and you all know this famous triangle. So what are the lessons learned so far? What we've seen here, and if you see that one, we increased the capacity to make the spectrum available in a very good way in order to allow more bandwidth. And that was on the course of this use of the C-band at that point in time. So therefore, enhanced mobile broadband, we can tick the box. That worked quite well. Does it work in time on that one? That's an issue with regarding to the rollout, but that's something we need to keep in mind as well when we're discussing 6G. We need to keep in mind here as also the demand-oriented side. And the demand was, and that was something I would like to remind here as well, also not only on the mobile or network operator side, so on the consumer part, but also on the industrial part. And we heard this throughout the conference already, that the verticals would like to have their own spectrum due to security reasons, controllability. That is something which is important for everybody to have then control of their own networks in order to ensure also the security there. So these new use cases on verticals is then combined, maybe from a machine-to-machine type communication. We haven't heard anything about that, so it would be interesting to maybe have a viewpoint of the panel on that point. And we heard about ultra-reliable and low latency communications. We've seen the low latency on some of the things, and even some companies, and I just need to remind the German company here, Sennheiser, who are providing 5G technology from a different angle, but with a very low latency on that one. So we are still there, we see the potential, and we see also the potential in order to extend this further. Europe has just made available 3.842, you heard that, and we still see here maybe some further points in the use of the millimetric wave bands. All of them have been made available in a harmonized way, but none of them is in use so far. But my personal guessing on that one was 2027. So let's see, maybe in 2 years we see something on that. And I have already seen also the uptake of network slicing, where we can see different maybe virtual networks in the normal networks with very defined characteristics can be used. Maybe that's a use case in the future as well, where 6G can really bring us forward. If we move now to what is it, the move from 5G to 6G? Is it an evolution or is it a disruption? Do we see then a completely new radio access technology? Yeah, maybe the colleague from Nokia can evolve a little bit on that one. But what we see here as well, we've seen that the application-based angle of the triangle is moving forward. We see that we would like to see immersive communications, which is an application side. We've seen then also AI, either on the network side, but also on the application side. And we've seen then ubiquitous connectivity as well. That means that we have to increase then the network capacities to a certain degree, but also the coverage area. Do we look then for additional spectrum? That's the question mark. Do we have enough spectrum available in that regard? That's the spectrum roadmap issue, which will be discussed further. What we've seen as well is the step in between 5G and 6G. So we've seen the standalone things, we've seen 5G advanced in that one. Is that something which is disruptive? Because 5G was a little bit downwards compatible to LTE, And now the standalone systems have their own standing and definitely also their requirements towards the equipment. And that is something we would like to see there as well in the future, that this usage of the standalone systems may provide then also new use cases. But will the consumer grab that up, and will this end up in a new business model? That's the question mark we have here as well. Here as well, then the question from my side regarding the millimetric wave bands. A lot of capacity is still there, which may provide then, in particular in indoor environments or in certain predefined environments, the possibility of high capacity, and therefore we can definitely sort out a lot of things for 6G. And then the questions, and I would not like to extend the time too much, on 6G as well. We are changing the focus, and you saw that yesterday with the Slido. We are coming from bandwidth, capacity, and speed towards maybe other aspects, efficiency, sustainability, and maybe also with the application-based perspective, then also the inclusion of other network elements. And the network elements could come from space too. So is then 6G really the network of networks? And how could a regulatory environment should look like that? That's the challenge here. Technically, feasibility, I would say yes, that's possible. But do we find the right balance in between the operators and the competition side? That is something which is definitely to be discussed, where we still have a lot of questions. What is the role then of new scenarios in there? Integrated sensing. Is this only one step towards an AI-based network where we have then the elements available and the information available? Or is this something which brings us really some new business cases as well? What we need to think about from my understanding of spectrum management is that we have already something in the back pocket, and that's the technology neutral use of existing bands. So every license could be used, at least in Germany, for every type of technology in that direction. And that is something which is a clear benefit for everybody. And we need to be clear and then also on the requirements of the different applications, in particular here, integrated sensing and communication. That is something where we definitely need to work further on and find the right way forward. And then the requirements for D2D, we heard about that already, and the impact of AI, of artificial intelligence on the networks, that may really bring us forward towards maybe a more sharing environment, but maybe also not. We need to have here an open mind and work forward in order to make the promises true, not only for 5G, but also for 6G. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. I think that was a good overview of some of the questions about what 6G might be and what it might not be, and whether it will need spectrum, which I think there's some disagreement on the stage on that topic. Next up, we have Erzsébet Vittori. She's the Executive Director at the Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking, SNSJU, not very catchy acronym, to give her perspective from a sort of research point of view and funding.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the organizers for the kind invitation. What I would like to do before undoubtedly heated discussion on 5G to 6G lessons learned is really just to provide a brief overview of Europe's research and innovation program for the development of the new 6G system. The SNSJU, our setup, our funding program, and perhaps some examples of how things are done differently from how it was done for 5G. So first of all, it sounds like a mouthful, the Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking. What are we? We are a public-private partnership. It's a public-private partnership set up, a so-called structured partnership, set up between the European Commission as the public member and the 6G Industry Association as the private member, with 50-50% weight in decision-making in the context of our governing board. We have a very clear, ambitious goal, which is really to lead the global transition towards 6G. And to this end, we are essentially a funding organization. We are implementing 900 million euros of Horizon Europe funding for research and innovation projects, which are based on a strategic innovation agenda and our annual work program. So if you go on our website, you will see our work program for 2025. And on the basis of the work program, each year we open a call for proposals, where, in the context of which we allocate roughly 130 million euros in each call. We really work with our projects and stakeholders to actively contribute in the 6G standardization process. I will show you a bit on the timelines on a later slide. We participate also in the coordination of the strategic deployment agenda for 5G corridors. And we have a kind of a very strong emphasis on the early engagement of vertical sectors. We have a last point on the slide, which is 6G is more than a technological achievement. It's a commitment to digital sovereignty, economic growth, and societal advancement. And I think that this is particularly true in the way the SNSJU has been set up, because if you look at our mission, you look at our work program, there is indeed a greater emphasis on addressing big societal and economic challenges. Sustainability is one of our key objectives. In fact, we have launched a lighthouse project related to sustainability, but we look at sustainability in a broader sense of the world. So one is, of course, greening, 6G becoming a more energy efficient, greener technology, enabling other sectors, other verticals to become greener, but also economic sustainability, about which I think there had been a lot of discussions already in previous panels, which focused more on policy and regulation. How does 6G relate to 5G? And the question was asked, is it a revolution or an evolution? I think it's a very good question, and the answer is that it is yet to be seen. However, there are some key technology areas in which we already foresee, or at least the consensual vision about 6G is that there will be some remarkable differences, such as that from the outset, the technology that is currently being researched and developed has set out a goal to deliver ubiquitous coverage via the integration of different technologies, and most notably non-terrestrial and terrestrial networks, which would allow indeed a coverage across the Earth. Intelligent sensing, positioning would be an entirely new feature, which would enable quite different and innovative use cases for this technology. It will be native AI, sustainable and secure by design. There are projects which are researching spectral efficiency, and of course, softwareization, cloudification, will be all technology developments and enhancements. I have already covered a lot of this slide about the setup of the public-private partnership. What I would like to add is really that in the SNSJU as a structured partnership, we not only have the public-private sector in terms of the European Commission and the 6G Industry Association, but we also have a very strong association with member states in the form of a states representative group, which means that we get strategic input. We consult them on strategically important documents, such as our annual work program, for example. And also we seek a broader kind of collaboration, not only with the vertical industries, but also other adjacent industries which provide very important inputs, such as AI or microelectronics, for example. And for this in, we have a broader stakeholders group. Finally, we have dedicated projects to international collaboration and partnerships with like-minded countries. Our work program follows a phased approach, divided into 3 key phases. We are now in phase 2. And I think what is interesting to see is really the bottom of the slide, where you can see how we have attempted really to align our phased approach to the international standardization process. And I think that when we discussed, do we want 5G, is it too soon or too late? Or actually, there is an international set timetable for the standardization of 6G. Whether or not we follow, we like it, it will happen with or without European players and European participation. If we want technology leadership, which is one of our key objectives together with industry and together with our public stakeholders, we encourage, and through our projects, we actually measure participation of European players, European research projects in the global standardization process. I think in the preparatory call, it was a question from one of the speakers to show how we are exactly allocating the public money that we work with, which is also matched by the same amount of private funding in the form of in-kind additional activities. This is a detailed overview. I'm sure you will have access to the slides afterwards. It shows by work stream how much money by topic we have been so far allocating. So far, we have invested around 500 million euros out of the 900 million, so we are roughly halfway. And this is the current allocation of our portfolio of 79 projects. New projects will come in 2025, 2026, and 2027. And to really conclude on a very positive note, use cases were mentioned. I think one of the key learnings is indeed that we have to engage with verticals very early on, and we have to start developing the use cases for the new technology very early on. And what you see on this slide is 6G use cases that have been presented by the flagship project of SNSJU together with other projects as well as national projects to the global standardization body 3GPP. These are very futuristic use cases, and what they have in common is that most of them actually make use of the new capabilities, the new technical features of the 6G technology, in particular, such as sensing or positioning. So with this very positive and futuristic view in mind, I look forward to the discussion, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Elisabeth. Thank you. So next up, we have Jonas Wessel, Director of Spectrum Management at the Swedish Post and Telecom Agency, PTS. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Forum Europe for arranging this conference again. We understand that it's a record participation, which is a bit strange since we're in the 8th year of the realization of 5G, but that might be that it's actually happening, which is good. I'll take a few minutes and try to sort of draw a few reflections from what we learned from 5G that we can take forward into 6G. In 3 phases: spectrum policy phase, second part will be hype and overselling, and the third part will be sort of what we can learn from all of this. If you look at the spectrum policy phase of what we did with 5G, I mean, there has been a lot of discussion and praise to the work done by TASUS and by the RSPG in defining very clear direction on the bands. And if you pick that apart a bit, well, it was half a success, to be honest. We picked up the 3.5 gigahertz band because that had been harmonized for something that didn't fly back in 2002. So that was laying vacant. We did, from the RSPG, set up to do a strategy direction for 5G. But what we did was actually to do an inventory of low-hanging fruits. We had the second digital dividend 700 band was on its way out. So that was sort of on the verge. We had 3.5 and we said that, okay, we need low, mid and high. All the developments in industry was around millimeter wave because that's where 5G was going to be. That was the new, important, interesting radio things to be developed. But in a country like Sweden and many other countries, well, you don't get all that far with millimeter wave. So that really, what we did, also worth mentioning in the 5G era, when we did all of this work, we were at a massive spectrum crunch. There was demand for more spectrum from left, right, and center. Today, we've had a discussion whether or not that is expanding or not at all. So we are today in a very different situations. We have abundant spectrum. One might say that, well, 26 and 40 gigahertz is not usable because it's too high. Yes, but we still have 6 gigahertz of vacant spectrum harmonized waiting for use. That is a lot. We have not yet used all of the harmonized spectrum available. So we actually are, from a spectrum dimension, ahead of the curve for the first time ever since, very, very long time. That is really a change. Important also to mention is that all the policy work is service and technology neutral. We take spectrum, we harmonize it, and it's actually up to the users of that spectrum to use it for the technology of their choice. There is lots of discussion on policy wishes and political will to have 5G standalone or have this and that service or this many megabits or latency. That's really up to the operators. What technologies and what services do they want to provide to the market? It's a good thing that we, from political side, have ambitious targets and goals. But one should never forget that spectrum is service technology neutral. If one would want to use the 3.5 gigahertz band for radar, you're very much welcome to do so, as long as you abide by the technical conditions and the out-of-band emission levels. Another learning, it's on hype and overselling. That is important. But to quote Public Enemy, don't believe the hype. Perhaps not make it into political targets. You need to talk about the metaverse. You need to talk about 50 billion connected devices tomorrow. You need to talk about Industry 4.0 and the automation of society and AI and all of that. Perhaps you should not always take the business case out of the use case, because the use case is a way to stretch the development of standards. It's to make engineers go to work and try to fix that latency. There is no market for remote surgery, open heart surgery from Tenerife to Sweden, but it's available and possible in networks, and that's fantastic. So you really have to separate the business case and the use case. The use case are really, really important. But when you come to vendors or operators and ask, why are there no autonomous cars in Brussels? Because we made the networks available. Well, there are other issues as well, but the networks are that. So what can we learn for the future? And I want to way back. I was in a meeting with scientists and researchers in Sweden, and what they really wanted was more engineers. More guys and girls and boys in school reading natural science, becoming engineers, going into development of new technologies and innovate that. That's where you need to start. There are too many people wanting to become influencers. Nothing bad with that, but they can't really develop the next generation of technologies. So that's really a learning. Where do we put investment? That might actually be in education. Another thing is that we as regulators always need to work spectrum harder. That's a continuous process. That has nothing to do with the Gs. As a regulator, the Gs are actually quite unimportant. So also another thing that is different from 5G to 6G, there is very little low-hanging fruit spectrum available on that shelf. There is a hidden resource that we've talked very little about. That is all that spectrum that is used for 2G and 3G. We are approaching the sunset of 2G and 3G. When we do comparisons to the US and say, oh, they have so much 5G. Yes, they discontinued 2G and 3G. They freed up all of that spectrum, so they can't use it for 2G and 3G. It's only 4G and 5G in the US, and that's important. All of that spectrum that is being underutilized for GSM and UMTS at the moment, that power could be released tomorrow. So the connection between introduction of new technology and the abolishment of old technology, it's important, and that should be remembered. Another thing that I think is important to note is that the technological development is continuing all the time. It's a continuous process. Every 10 years, you package it into a G, and then you wave the flag and say, this is a G. That is actually not true. It's a packaging of all interesting innovations. Massive MIMO, that's one thing. Sensing, that's possibly on the 6G agenda. What happened to terahertz spectrum? There's really interesting research being done there. Is that a part of 6G? It's a choice. So we pick all of those things, but don't forget that the innovation is ongoing all the time. When you ask operators, so what's your view on 6G? They run away and hide. They don't want to talk about that because they're trying to create 5G. So there is really no push for it. I would also want to just plug briefly the work ongoing in the RSPG at the moment. We have a plenary meeting in 2 weeks. We will be publishing the report on 5G 6G vision, etc. And I think that's really, really important. As a regulator, there's been very many interesting discussions over these 2 days, and I agree very much to that. As a regulator, I am looking to what are the societal problems that we can solve with spectrum. It is not to sort of solve the new technical thing. It is what is the societal issue. One of them that has been noticed around here, it is not capacity and latency, it's coverage. It is ubiquitous access, because we have become so reliant on these technologies. So you can't be without it because you don't have a map, you don't have any money, you don't know where your family is. So you need, I can't open my house without a mobile phone, which is a risk. So how do we handle those issues? They are not as big and sexy and sort of digital twinny. They are actually problems that we do see. So with that, just to reiterate, there is a hidden potential in speeding up the discontinuation of 2G and 3G. I know it's a difficult thing. I know for member states, it is strenuous work for the Commission. There's a bit of issues, but that is a hidden potential. So rather than looking at all those bands that are not available, look at those that we can work harder. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Next up, we've got Natalia Vicente, Vice President of Public Affairs at GSOA, which represents the satellite industry.
Thank you very much. I do also have some slides as my colleagues. Well, first of all, I think the biggest change is that we are on a 6G panel and satellite is here and has been mentioned. I think that's the biggest change already compared to 5G, where it was not the case always, at least. Already yesterday, a colleague of mine was talking, so I think you are familiar with GSOA. We are the Satellite Industry Association. And indeed, if we start a little bit with the lessons learned, as some of my colleagues today, I've been using the same slides for quite a while, because it's how we see the evolution, how we see where we were, and where do we want to be, and what are the changes that we have been living. So today we talk a lot about spectrum, but we talk a lot about the visions. And when we started first talking about 5G, we talk about this network of networks. And the question is, have we actually achieved to have that network of networks? I think at one point we got caught up with this speed and latency race, while we neglected other significant variables like coverage. We have advanced very much when it comes to all the 5G progress, especially when we come to standards. And we realized that there were some milestones achieved by satellite in the release 17 and the acknowledgement that satellite could play a component on 5G. However, this came at the second thought. It's maybe the lacks that we have on 5G, what we wanted 5G to be, but we are trying to build in 6G. That could be one of the questions. But of course, there has been certain changes between we started talking about 5G and we are talking about 6G. That is, there's an increased demand that we see around the world, but also in Europe, of course, on reliable, secure, high capacity and ubiquitous connectivity. We have also an innovative ecosystem in the satellite environment with the new LEO systems, with the capabilities that GEO proposed, and also the MEO satellites. And we see the importance on the verticals with sectors like agriculture, oil, and gas. So the nice 6G, of course, a slide that we all have. When we talk about 6G and we envision a future of connectivity, we have to go beyond the consumers, as we have heard, but still we need to take account of that there is maybe only a 2% of the population uncovered in Europe, but that still remains 10 million of people that are spread against a vast geography. And as we heard earlier today, it's beyond consumers, it's about also the industrialization. So 6G is set to revolutionize industry and enable groundbreaking applications. What does this mean is that we have a space for growth and return on investment. We talk about direct to device, we talk about autonomous transportation, we talk about precision agriculture. We know that D2D and IoT and NTN, all this is bringing a more interconnected world and enhances the access to reliable communications. And if we only look at D2D, and in many cases, the problem has been how much are we investing on developing a new technology and how much are we getting in return? As we heard before, it's not just about the use cases, but the business models. Only looking at D2D, we see that in the next 7 or 8 years, there is a possible market of $50 billion. So what are the changes that we see when we talk about 6G? Beyond speed and latency, it is a moment to think about the other variables. How about prioritizing coverage as one of them? If we look at early standardization, it is important that satellite is not considered as a second thought, but the standardization starts at the beginning. And for this, maybe the work that is being done in the ITU with IMT 2030 requires this synchronized space for terrestrial and satellite components. And when we talk about investment, it's important to see it holistically. How much investment do we need in Europe to really connect everyone? We need to see at all technologies and what they need. So to have a stronger EU-led funding programs and public and private partnerships, as we have heard today, and of course, a lot of collaboration on it. Collaboration between industries and collaboration between the public and the private sector. So if we want the 6G to be socially and economically inclusive, meaning achieving what we wanted 5G to be, we need to exactly have policies and regulation that are technically inclusive and that foster that collaboration between the technologies, not putting one against the other or who waits what, but how can we all participate in the game. There's a need of consistency between the technological advances that we have been hearing during the day, but also the policy that goes behind it and the objectives that we put in our global goals and digital goals in order to be able to enhance these technologies to succeed. And of course, this is a slide that I think I've been using since I first started in the satellite environment, because our vision has always been this. So when we think about if it's an evolution or a revolution, we always start talking about revolutions and then we settle by evolutions. And I think maybe this is the occasion that we have in which we really can achieve what we are thinking about by taking all the pieces of the puzzle. So maybe using an analogy, because in these last 2 days we have heard some of those, I think we need to think about 6G maybe as a living organism. There's systems, there's organs, and all play a key function. And without all of them in function, the body doesn't work. So if we think about red blood as the fuel that is the oxygen and the spectrum being that oxygen that transports the data, we clearly definitely need a circulatory system and a heart that is the integration of the technologies, the satellite and the terrestrial technologies that guarantee the uninterrupted connectivity everywhere. So the building blocks are there. We have done the work with 5G. Let's see what we need to do for the 6G to actually deliver in the goals that we set already before. But I think the technology is there to deliver on those today, focusing clearly on the business cases and the use cases that we can propose to Europeans to be leading on the 6G race. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Wolfgang Bilz, Head of Spectrum and Regulatory Affairs Europe at Shure, for a PMSE perspective.
Wow. Okay. So thank you very much. So my presentation will be slightly different what we heard before. So I'm focusing more on the technical hurdles. What happened? Why is 5G not ready for the vertical audio PMSE? And why we have that big questions mark that this can ever happen, and wondering what 6G can ever do for us. So we are a leading manufacturer for live sound. So the next picture, I just show you what is real life for us, live audio on stage. And I want to point out to the right-hand side, you see a small transmitter suit in a wardrobe, in this case underneath on the head. This is one very important item. I'll come back later in the next slides. So I use now an analogy to illustrate what the issue is, what we are facing. So if you think about 5G or 6G data highway, so what we need, if I see this bridge, we have very strong latency requirements. So we need access to the fast lane on demand. So when I switch on the wireless microphone, it has to be able to run full speed, no question. We have to ensure that there are no barriers. So this full speed has to be, audio stream has to work all time. For large events, actually we'll need all lanes. We need even more. So a musical theater, which 40, 60 wireless microphone channels, if I use the current stuff, equipment available 5G, I need 4 or 5 base stations to support just one stage. But on the other hand, it's used only temporarily. So Olympics happens every 4 years. So actually in Olympics Paris, mobile operators wanted to switch on additional mobile base stations. They had to be switched off to make PMSE happen so that the event can take place. But this is only every 4 years. Saying that, I think it's obvious audio PMSE is a corner case for 5G. And there is no real business case to support it. So obviously the mobile service providers, they don't want to set 4 base stations just for one stage, while a musical theater cannot afford that. And additional, the technology is not ready. So actually, if you take current equipment, the latency requirement, what we have, we are far away from that. So from our point of view, when we think about 5G, development 5G and also 6G, we need shared access bands and local licensing. So from our point of view, now having in Germany, I think we're 3.7 gigahertz, and then we have the 3.8 to 4.2 gigahertz in some countries, and now it's getting European-wide. This is shared access bands, which started vertical industries like us to think about innovation. If you auction a band and give it to 2 or 3 mobile service providers, if I want to say very direct, it's blocked for innovation for vertical markets. Next, very important item is that all 5G, 6G technologies must be supported. So again, with 3.8 or 4.2 gigahertz being available, we started innovation looking into DECT NR+, which is also 5G technology, as 5G 3GPP is not able to support. So we were looking to 5G NR+. We will have access to 3.8 to 4.2 gigahertz, but there is still the other limitation. And then I come back to the picture I showed you with the transmitter suit in the wardrobe. We have another item which we have to cope with. This is the propagation, the body absorption. So we need, for physical reasons, access below 1 gigahertz. So actually we use 470 to 700 megahertz. For us, the worst case, if you hear what I was saying, worst case for us is the spectrum, I think, which I've seen in some of the reports, 600 megahertz should be given to 6G. The worst case for us would be It is auctioned, so it's blocked. We cannot use it, no innovation. So we need sharing to be able to think about. And this is my last bullet point here, thinking smart about which frequency band fits for which purpose. We need a clear strategy. And I would like to underline what was said by Andy from Cisco today. If you're just following, and this is now referring to what we heard from Barrick Robert yesterday, we're just listening to these hype buzzing words, AI, immersive, 5G can do everything, 6G is even better, and you just give spectrum to it. It's not a smart way from our point of view. We have to think about what is really needed. Is it just connecting people in rural areas? Then we have to think about, and this is, I support then what Jonas was saying, refarming might be possibility because there is enough spectrum below 1 gigahertz to support just connecting people. If you want to offer high capacity networks, the frequency band below 1 gigahertz is not an option. You have to go for higher frequency bands where you have higher bandwidth to support that. So we have to think about what is smart, what can support the 6G use cases. And I like very much what we heard in the just in the presentation before. We talk about 6G, but actually the high level view should be how to connect the different use cases and users. And it's not about 6G, it's about everything, which could be every technology available. And then the last bullet point I put here, and funding to bring standards development settings into reality. I think we heard it also already yesterday. So 85% of the stuff which is written in standard is not available on products. And this is also one reason why I now talk for all verticals, why some verticals are not that prominent on private networks because they cannot buy the equipment. It's not there. The chipsets do not support it. And this is, again, the business case. And I don't know if we saying here and funding. So it's a question if this can be somehow supported by regulation or European Union to bring this further. So thank you very much. And actually, Shure turns 100 years, which is very phenomenal for a tech company. Thank you very much.
Should we swap? Thank you, Wolfgang. Speaking of PMSE, and happy birthday, by the way. Next, we've got Volker Ziegler. He's the Senior Technology Advisor at a little-known company called Nokia, that you may have heard of.
Thank you, Richard. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about the future. It's all about opportunity. 6G is on. And what I must highlight, maybe right at the very beginning of this talk, is that in Europe, as we speak, we have a leading position in research, 6G research, right? And this is important. Why? Because, and I appreciated this yesterday, some of you are aware, we had a lot of very honest and fact-based discussion, very valuable. Thomas Skordas, the organizers shared a lot of data sets that we are lagging behind with 5G rollout and 5G build-out of system and infrastructure. And we need to be aware of that and be conscientious of it and discuss ways to speed up. At the same time, though, let's get ready for the next era, the 6G era coming up. And what I want to do in the next 7 minutes is to share with you all maybe some additional elements of perspective in terms of what it actually means. And actually, yes, Richard, I work for a cool company based out of Espoo in Finland called Nokia. We have Nokia Bell Labs, iconic research center. I volunteered, by the way, to engage in 6G research in 2019, 6 years ago. And so we have come a long way. And when you look at what it is that in the meantime, Alex, also your question, that we have kind of framed conceptually, technology-wise, I think we're in fairly good shape. You know, when we got started, I'm from Bavaria, so I can share that metaphor with you all. You know, the early days were like deep powder skiing. Any skiers in the room? One, okay, well, some. Okay, maybe the metaphor doesn't go so well, it doesn't resonate, but I can tell you it's fun if you have fresh snow, no tracks. In the meantime, there's a lot of consensus, and that's good, and it highlights some of the themes that we need to exploit so as to address opportunities as reflected by broader trends. Number one, demand for higher network performance, and this goes beyond capacity, is on. Growing device ecosystem. We see a lot of momentum there, thousands of devices. I just came back from Vegas. So in case you're not aware, Consumer Electronics Show, it's a crazy show. But what is great is that increasingly we have form factors other than just devices. We have glasses, some of them come with hearing aid, and this is just the beginning. Immersive experience, diving in, that's what the Americans call it. And of course, yes, all of this is enabled, and it goes hand in hand with AI, and therefore AI is at the heart of what you could call a value-centric approach, and highlighting some of technology building blocks in the middle of the circle. Probably the one that I would wish to highlight beyond what has been mentioned already is probably API exposure, opening up for new ecosystems and business models. And it is about serving society, right? Yes, we want to generate growth, strengthen European competitiveness beyond telco, part of the ambition, but it's really about, I agree with you, Elisabeth, it's about serving society, objectives of societal sustainability beyond environmental resilience and digital inclusion. And with this, where do we stand? In a nutshell, good news, 5G adoption continues to scale, but there is a couple of lessons learned. And when you look at the trajectory from existing to new to emerging, a lot of exciting opportunities still ahead. When you look at the numbers, as I said, we discussed this extensively yesterday. Now, at first glance, some of you might be tempted to say 80% in 2030 sounds good. No, not good enough. We are 2-3 years behind leading economies in North America and China. But we need to step up. And when you look at technology, good news, we are ready for this, right? From a technology angle, there's a small little box here that shows you that in terms of just throughput, we have improved with 5G by a factor of 5x. By the way, these are crowdsourced numbers, not just theoretical numbers. So it's really happening. And yet, what are the lessons learned? Monetization is insufficient. Yes, business cases. We need more discussion. And this links into slow uptake of SA, standalone. These two things are related. And some of the pioneers in the room may remember, we had heated discussion on this in the early days of 5G 10 years ago. I can tell you, I was in the camp of folks who said, we need to go for standalone from day one. We lost that battle because some folks said, well, all that matters for day one is broadband access. Now in hindsight, poor choice. Let's do better with 6G. Let me say this up front. We want to go simplistic, simple options and single architecture. At the same time, yes, there is challenge around industry consensus, but let's also be clear, ladies and gentlemen, that's also fine. We need to have constructive debate, not just in Europe, but worldwide. The way it works is we have cool ideas out of research, right? And we have cool research, not just at Nokia Bell Labs. We have a lot of cool other companies that we work with, including our competitors, pre-competitive joint effort, including our great universities. Also in this country, by the way, in Antwerp, in all, right? Let's leverage the best ideas. Let's have a discussion what the best ideas are, put these into standard, and then finally into product and market impact. So the challenge is actually the right thing to have in terms of constructive discussion so as to agree what should make it to standard. And single architecture is the option we need to fight for. Right? Going back to 5G, key lesson learned, let's not do NSA again. I mean, hopefully the risk is low, but there's still discussion. And what we really propose and what is good is that the major players here in Europe, we agree. We agree on some things here in Europe, at least from the vendor and research community angle. 6G evolution, evolving the core, building on 5G, some smart innovation, like the user plane related, mobility management, some cool elements. But let's make sure there's only one single radio active in the device, right? So dynamic spectrum sharing, as we have with 5G for the techies in the room, is not very efficient, right? Huge overhead. We don't want that. Dual connectivity, let's avoid it if we can. And with this, let's move to vision coming in stages. And it goes back to some of the comments that are appropriate. There was an element probably of overselling and hype with 5G. So lesson learned is let's be clear as to what the focus is for day one. And I think when I look at public-private partnership, we are in good sync with all our key partners. and of course, both public and private, in terms of we need focus. So extreme MIMO on existing grid is a key element of focus, definitely is smooth migration, investment protection, the operators would say. And by the way, this is also the time to highlight, it's no longer just about spectral efficiency. By the way, we have cool ideas as to how to increase that, but it's also about energy efficiency. And the higher you go in spectrum, if you go to terahertz, spectral efficiency doesn't matter. I mean, right, for obvious reasons, because we have huge chunks of spectrum. But true, the reach is the issue. So with this, wrapping up, and this is not surprisingly a quick look at spectrum. So we do need new spectrum. Let me repeat, we need new spectrum to drive our leadership ambition, to leverage the cool research, the leading research position we have in Europe. We need new spectrum in a dedicated and licensed fashion, so as to allow for macro base station deployment and deliver on what has just been now decided in 3GPP, in case you haven't heard it, to increase bandwidth from 100 megahertz to 200. So this is real, we need it. So let's push to the limit of our ability for the upper 6 gigahertz band all the way up to 8.4. Why is that so important? It's important because we need to live up to the additional demand that we see coming in terms of just focusing on data throughput. It'll happen 20 to 30% year by year. And coming back from Vegas, I mean, okay, to be honest, they don't have a clue, most of the Vegas players yet, but we'll tell them how to enable all this in a connected fashion. And then, of course, yes, ubiquitous connectivity, low bands. And again, here, probably it's a good idea to include 470 to 694 as a candidate for 6G, so as to find ways to move beyond just connecting people. And I'm from Nokia, I can say this. I think in the meantime, it's about connecting immersive experience, connecting robots in an augmented and immersive way, and across the country to the degree it makes sense. So with this, thank you all. Thank you, Richard. Back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Yes, I'm back. So I've got some questions for all of you, and then I'll try to open it up if we have time at the end. Just looking at the clock, I'm not sure if we will, to audience questions. I'm going to start with you, Alex. A lot of European countries took a similar approach with the pioneer bands, the spectrum. Germany did as well, but they did one thing differently. They took 100 megahertz and they gave it to the industry to use in private networks. I think in the year since, there's been a lot of criticism towards that decision. What do you make of it a few years later? Was it sort of worth it? And what lessons can you take from that particular decision to 6G?
Thank you for the question. Well, from our perspective, it was clearly, as I said, demand-oriented. We saw from the verticals that we would like to see it, and here's the point to focus standards, and maybe also to the other presentations we heard already. We have to think also in the regulatory way differently. So if we have then a possibility to make available a certain technology in certain bands, then this is not only on an exclusive basis for certain mobile operators. Maybe we have different operators in there, and the verticals are the different mobile operators. They were the key driver in Germany of 5G technology. They rolled out the first 5G networks, and then the mobile network operators paved the way later on that one, in order also demand driven. That is one of the elements we have to take away here as well. And when we discuss then maybe spectrum below 1 gigahertz, that could be also the challenge here to see, is that way how we do this with auctioning and exclusive licensing really the right way forward in the future? We heard it from other perspectives with regards to sharing. This was some kind of sharing approach where we said, okay, we have the 400 megahertz available, and we made it available then for different purposes, for different operators. And we, of course, rethink our position every time. Spectrum management is constant change. We are quite clear on that one, and we need always to adapt to the new circumstances and the new requirements.
Right. Quick follow-up on that. Are you seeing a similar sort of demand from industries as we think about 6G, or are you not hearing from them that we need more sort of dedicated industrial spectrum? Are you going to take another slice out of 6G spectrum? That's what I'm saying.
Well, we heard that the industry would like to keep pace with the development. That is clear. But I think Europe did a very wise way forward in order to make enough spectrum available of 3.8 to 4.2. That provides a lot of options and opportunities already in that case. And we need to keep then the pace ahead also for 6G on that one. And I think we have already consensus at least on this panel that this is an evolutionary process. So we can really build something up here over the next 5 years in order to make 6G a complete European success.
Great. Erzsébet, as you sort of look at 6G projects, are you changing your perspective on what might be worth funding and what might not be worth funding based on what happened with 5G? I think specifically I guess you could think about millimeter wave related projects. Is there less interest in those now because we've seen that millimeter wave adoption is quite slow in Europe? Or is there any other sort of lessons that have redirected where the money is going and where the research interest is going?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that there are a few things which are being done differently, learning from the 5G history. One of them is, I think, a challenge that has been referred to several panelists, and I suppose also yesterday, is from use cases to actual business models. And in the research area, I think this is a challenge that we are trying to address through the very early involvement and engagement of not only the verticals, but also the adjacent input technologies, which will be critical to developing a new and different 6G technology. Very concretely, we have dedicated streams. It was quickly shown on my slides to experimental infrastructure, but also large-scale trials with verticals. So that is a very clear, I would say, evolution. And also I would invite actually the audience to see very clearly how this is evolving throughout the projects. On our website, we actually have a so-called verticals cartography, which really tracks vertical engagement in our project. So it also shows currently which are the verticals which are most involved. You can look at the top 5, the low 5, but for example, transport sector, automotive, railways, media, or healthcare are very engaged in our projects. But it evolves over time. So this can be tracked very clearly, and it's very transparent. The second one I have also mentioned in my presentation is really putting money very clearly into the technology being sustainable and secure by design. I think that is clear, and also learning from the lesson of fragmentation in 5G, the standardization process as well. We have a clear objective to encourage projects to participate in the global standardization process. We have mechanisms in our program for cross-project collaboration, as well as international collaboration. There are many more to say, but I will stop here. I think these are some really key changes and trying to address key learnings.
Great, thank you. Jonas, Nokia just now was very clear. 6G needs new spectrum. I think you were very clear. 6G does not need new spectrum. How do we square this circle?
Yeah, I mean, that is a big question, and that's why the debate we had previously between William and Stefan, it might be an academic question whether that curve is going up and down. But for us as regulator, that is an important issue. What we can see, and what I tried to say in my presentation, was that in sort of laying the grounds for 5G, there was spectrum to be found. At the moment, we have a bit of difficulty to invent new spectrum. We have, from the RSPG and regulators for decades now, been talking about sharing. If you look at what happened in the US in 3.5, well, they developed CBRS, which is not, I mean, it's a bug, it's not a feature, but that was a way to share that band. That was beautiful. When we in Europe look at, in the run-up to WLC 27, we say, oh no, these are military bands, we can never share. There might be learnings, but to find sort of vacant greenfield spectrum, well, we have it in 26 and 40, so that's just sort of start using, but no one wants that as of yet. Or you might develop things that actually work in. Yeah, that's good. Have you sold it to anyone? Oh, sorry. No, I think, I mean, yeah, but I mean, we're really trying to understand, I mean, we want to work spectrum harder. We want to enable the use of spectrum, but we do not want to sort of sterilize spectrum based on a hype. We don't want to harmonize and put a, well, IMT or any other label on spectrum and hope that it fills up. We want to enable spectrum for actually being used by equipment. So I think I mean, it's a cowardly response, but that's why we need to follow. We listen to industry in 5G and we harmonize 26 and 40. And I do tease the market because nothing has happened. We need more proof before we go down that route again. Thank you.
I think that's fair enough. Volker, do you want to? You can jump in now, and then I'll go back to my row of questions here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonas. I guess the key point to be added probably is that the different spectral bands have different properties. And of course, you are fully aware, but just to explain maybe to the audience in case you're not aware. So the higher you go in frequency, the lower the range gets, right? So that's one thing to consider. So millimeter wave you cannot use for the kind of use cases, macro use cases that the lower bands are suitable for, just to make that point. Now, the other key argument, and that now is very, very important, and it's just one more sentence, but this is key. So keep in mind that now we have a variety of operators, not just CSPs, could be enterprise and vertical. I agree with you, Alex. It doesn't matter who it is, but CSPs providing macro coverage, mission critical services in 3.5, they can reuse due to the laws of radio physics, due to basic principle of phased array. What is the key rule you need to have in mind? Remember from physics lab in school, lambda half spacing. Remember that rule? So phased array, if you move from 3.5 to 7, you can use the same location. That's powerful because it's economically extremely powerful. You reuse the sites you have. By the way, environmentally, it makes sense. Even in historic Stockholm, you don't want to have 100 more new sites. Probably you'll find ways to prevent that anyways. But okay, so that's the economic reason also. Let's keep that in mind and not focusing on a particular stakeholder group. I'm with you, Alex. But I think the argument of mission critical macro services and leveraging the sites we have, that's why upper 6 gigahertz, I think, is a discussion we need to have in the interest of European leadership.
Right. Yeah, do you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, just one comment on the physical aspect. So if you think about the frequency below 1 gigahertz you were mentioning, could you imagine put MIMO on that so you can double the capacity of the bandwidth? Why is it not considered? Because it's cheaper to get spectrum from the regulators. So it's a question, are we smart enough assigning frequencies?
No.
So, and I'm saying that because I know that there were researchers, companies started developing MIMO. And whenever a frequency band got auctioned, these companies went down because there's no business case for that.
Absolutely, and it's my mistake. I should have explained this better. So massive MIMO is part of the way forward, right? And so thanks for that comment. Absolutely, excellent point. So what we really are talking about is how do we tackle the anticipated 20 to 30% data growth, okay? Starting from that assumption. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest it'll happen. There's still uncertainty, but still. And now what we are talking about is a combination of leveraging massive MIMO, system on chip. By the way, leading European companies, one out of Finland, and there's another one. Remember, in Sweden, not far from Finland, headquartered, but with key research centers all over Europe. So what we do is massive MIMO system on chip to do exactly what you do. When you look at 20X, probably half of that will come from that kind of technology innovation. And the other half, ladies and gentlemen, we need to get from new spectrum. That's the story. But thank you for that point. Absolutely appreciate it.
Where we have another session after this all about spectrum, so I'm sure we'll hear more about it, and I want to get some other topics out of the way as well. Natalia, I was getting a bit of deja vu with your presentation in terms of 5G was going to be the satellite integration, and now it's 6G. I'm curious, how much progress has there been in actually applying 3GPP standards within satellites? Are we having our satellites launching with that technology integration at the moment, or is it still the stage where that hasn't happened yet?
Thank you. I'm not going to go into all the details of spectrum because I'm not a specialist on that. But if I may just a point on that, I think coming forward, and especially because WRC 27 has been mentioned, one thing that has really changed on the way that we look at spectrum is to ensure that all technologies have enough spectrum to deploy and continue investing and innovating on their own services also. So I think for WRC 27 that an 80% of the agenda or a high level of the agenda is satellite focused already talks to the change that is happening in the way that we look at technology. On the question about 5G and the integration, and I agree, I see myself years ago talking about this integration, and I think the message hasn't changed that much, but what has changed is everything around it. The technology has improved, and definitely the standardization efforts and of course the investment of the satellite ecosystem into building satellites already with Release 17 and so on, has an impact in how also the rest of the market looks at satellite. The capabilities of satellite has improved. Therefore, it is seen as a player that can add to the equation in a different way that was seen before. Not because everything is new, but the same evolution that has happened outside has happened also within the industry. So we have also continued evolving and innovating in our own way. And that contributes and the experience that the satellite environment has on precisely this collaboration, on this, we don't do the things alone, we count also with other technologies to provide to the final consumer. I think that experience has brought to the table to 6G. So maybe in 5G, there were a lot of the members of GSOA that have been in programs and contribute to the deployment for sure. I think we look at it differently, and that's why, even though the message may be similar, I think how we take it and how we look at it is different. I've never seen anyone on a panel about 5G talking so much about satellite, except for when it was a satellite representative. And I think that's major, because that's maybe the revolution, that we're seeing it in a different way.
Okay, so there has been some progress. That's good to hear. Wolfgang, PMSE, you're looking into this DECT standard, which is a sort of alternate 5G standard. Why can't you do something 3GPP? What's the hurdle? What's the sort of, in my head, it would seem like it would be technically possible. What's the sort of, what's stopping you from really integrating in 3GPP standards?
Yeah, if I'm very honest, so 3GPP is a beast. There are many thousands people in there. So it's very hard to get something in there which creates a business case for corner case, what we have. In DECT, it's actually European developed standard by ETSI. So it's not a private thing. So it's a ETSI. And we have much more possibility to influence what's going on. And so it's for technical reason and just business reasons. DECT NR Plus offers much more possibilities, what we need, looking in our specifications, than 3GPP. That's it. Very easy. Yeah.
3GPP is a beast.
Yes, sorry to be that using that word, but it's, I don't know if you have whoever, I think there are many people here joining 3GPP meetings, so it could be that in 1 week you have 10,000 documents which are considered.
Yeah.
Stop here.
Okay, I was looking at the clock, it says 2 minutes, so I wonder if we have any audience questions. I can see it, yes we do. We have William Webb in the front row, or the second row, over here.
Thank you. So the mobile operators have said some things about 6G in particular through the NGMN and the publications of that body. And also publicly, a number of them have stood up. And I think the key to their message is software only, no new hardware, and a focus on operational efficiencies, lower costs of running the networks, lower power consumption. That's not the message I heard from the panel. Do you think they're wrong?
It's a great question. Who would like to take that one on?
Yeah, I think I can comment in the sense that when I look at the latest NGMN publications, I perceive there's a more balanced view. There has been a lot of publication. Remember last year, the exercise led by Shavan, and also some Chinese operators were involved. You probably remember where we actually looked at the use cases and the new scenarios of experience. And these go beyond the dimensions that you mentioned that are very relevant. But I think maybe there's an interesting part to answer your question as well. In the evidence of doubt, the one thing that we always successfully argue, especially to be blunt from operator side of the house, is cost efficiency and investment protection, and can we use the same hardware? In that sense, I confer. But when I look at MGMN, probably to defend them a little bit, at least looking at last year's study on use cases, I see evidence also in a different way beyond what you just said.
Right, I think we had one more question, one row behind, or 2 rows behind.
Yeah, thank you, Päivi Ruusko from Telia Company. I heard some comments. I think it was from Jonas and Wolfgang on possibility to use the existing 2G and 3G bands for 6G. And just for your information that we have switched off the 3G already, that spectrum is in use for other technologies, 4G and 5G. In Sweden, we have a bit different situation in our case because we didn't have any 3G spectrum, but we have now. So the same spectrum which we will deploy, of course. And I do see that 2G in most countries will also be switched off before the 6G becomes available. So we cannot really afford keeping those bands empty. So those will be in use for other technologies. Then we saw some presentation from Nokia, which had very different views on maybe what the spectrum demands are. So in 2G and 3G bands, the spectrum availability is quite limited that is in use. So I would like to hear what are you expecting from the 6G service if that would be the kind of case that we would need to use very limited amount of spectrum. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to aim at in my presentation. Rather than to have all of these really visionary things, we're talking about fairly basic things. We're talking about coverage in areas where we don't have coverage. We're talking about security for that, because since society is relying so much on it, it might not be the enormous amounts of spectrum. It might be that it's truly ubiquitous. Mobile operators are still building networks for mobile use, outdoor, with a handset. If society is relying on that, I think there is need to do something else on the infrastructure level to actually enable a truly ubiquitous network, indoor coverage. To actually do something, and that could easily be done with not all that much spectrum. So I think, take a step back and see what is demanded by society to actually to digitize. We are probably still at the start of digitalization of society. In Sweden, you can't pay with money in a store anymore. Well, very few. So we're relying on the networks and the terminals to do that. Well, there was a server that went down in the US a couple of years ago. A major grocery store chain, I won't mention who it was, in Sweden, had to close all their stores because all the inventory system, and they couldn't sell anything. So you couldn't even go in and give them money to buy bread. They closed the store and let things rot because you couldn't trust the system. I think that's the type of thing that I would be looking for if that is 6G, but the next phase of relying on networks in general. And that could easily be done below 1 gigahertz.
On that, Really quick, Alex.
Yeah, just very quickly, and going then maybe combining your two questions on that one, and that's why I was so focusing on the application side of 6G on that one and not on the spectrum side, was exactly that all of these new and very visionary use cases which were coming up were mostly indoor. So the question is, how much bandwidth do we need for augmented reality in outdoor cases? I think we won't use glasses and just to see what is already on the street. We need to have maybe additional information, but that can be rather good compressed and maybe solved already with the existing networks. And there we see maybe other use cases which were coming up, and therefore then we can have a look on the indoor coverage and then on the millimeter wave things and maybe some other technologies as well. And that's the network of network ideas we need to implement as well.
Yeah, well, just to be a little bit provocative.
No. I haven't asked to conclude.
Please go ahead.
I think just
10 seconds.
Just to, yeah, one sentence, just to recall in this discussion how seriously we take ubiquity and the basics, is that one of the new use cases which was on my slide was actually an all Earth coverage. So I think that's really part of the European vision and program.
Great.
And I agree with that, Ashipet, absolutely. But one more
Very good.
sentence, and this is now very important.
I'm counting the words.
Coverage in the 30s is not what coverage has been in the 10s or the 20s. Coverage in the 30s will be different. Coverage in the 30s, were you in Vegas? I didn't see you in Vegas. If you walk the streets of Brussels today, you're not indoors. You walk the streets. You meet somebody. I just met some folks I hadn't met before indoors, but we could meet outdoors. You might be in a car. You might be using a drone following you. Or so what I'm saying is there's a plethora of dive-in immersive experiences that are mobile by nature. And at least my vision for mankind is we are not all living indoors in one room. Hope not. I mean, sorry, the vision that I hear is like Corona 2.0, which we don't need. We want to move and experience life. And these use cases, not just entertainment, but health, transport related, are real, and they need bandwidth.
Thank you. A bit more than one sentence, but I appreciate it. All right.
If I may, just because I also want to say.
No, I have to say
course.
stop. I have to draw a line on this.
But just one very sentence, because it's agreeing very much with what has been said, that we need to look at all the services that are going to be provided and not to undermine the needs of IoT that are not the same needs as, for sure, broadband solutions. And we haven't talked about it, and I know that we will discuss in other events about it, but the impact that D2D is having in all these discussions, whether it is on the spectrum discussions, but whether it is also on all the evolution of the technology. But I think the nice thing is that we all agree in a lot of things, and that is a positive note to end.
On that note, thank you guys. Thanks.